Thank you very much, David, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, my talk will be actually a direct follow-up of the presentation that was given this morning by Brendan Cuddy. Brendan introduced you to the reflection paper that the EMA published last year, and I will talk about the major topics that we identified in the implementation plan that we would need to tackle first, that they have the greatest priority. So I will briefly touch upon the topic as to why it was important to have an implementation plan, talk about the major objectives, the progress up to date, and the further steps that we would still like to take on this topic. I will not spend a lot of time on my first slide, which is why. We all know the background and the reasons why we need to do something about shortages. Why is it such an important issue? But I would like to highlight maybe two things that from the perspective of a regulatory agency are much more important. The first one is the facilitation of a benefit-risk evaluation. And this was also mentioned this morning by Rafe Suvarna, because the CHMP often finds themselves in a situation where a very quick assessment and evaluation of the information is needed. But it's not always so straightforward. We are dependent on the information that we get from the MAH, from different sources, from experts, physicians, etc. And to find the perfect consensus of all that information in a very timely manner, it's sometimes very complex. So we feel that this is an area that would definitely deserve a further attention. And the second one is the how to measure the impact of a drug shortage on a patient. This is very important when it comes to the closure, when the situation is resolved, when the supply is restored, and we could have had patients that for months, maybe years, have been exposed to exactly non-optimal treatment. Would it be a lower dose or a lower frequency of administration, or they were switched to another treatment? But we don't currently, unfortunately, have any reliable measures on how to actually look at this impact, how to evaluate the impact of that situation. So what were the major objectives, the real topics that we wanted to tackle, that we thought had the highest priority? Number one was the definition of a critical medicine. Obviously, not every product that experiences a disruption in supply is immediately classified as a critical medicine. Second issue was the escalation of a situation of a supply shortage from a national or local level onto the European level, where a CHMP would make a decision that then would be binding and valid in all member states. Another issue was the clarification of an input that we receive here in the CHMP from the national authorities, because obviously the situation with the availability of alternative treatments or the affected medicinal product could be very different from member state to member state. We strongly feel that there is a need to improve our communication, also from the agency side, and I'll talk about that later. And of course, to improve the national and international cooperation within Europe, with physicians, with patients, with organization alliances, and also with the other medicines agencies outside Europe. So those were the major objectives, and I'd now like to proceed with updating you on the progress one by one, as I mentioned. I'm very happy to say that we agreed on a definition of a critical medicinal product. We've set down a set of rules how to define a medicinal product as critical. So we have a couple of criteria. And I think it was our PDA representative this morning that gave a talk on the assessment of a risk of a medicinal product that is with a quality defect or with a manufacturing problem. And I was very pleased to see that the same criteria were being applied when that product could be classified as critical or not critical. So basically the seriousness of the condition and the availability of alternative treatments. The definition of alternative treatment, of course, it's another topic, but again, at least we agreed on these two criteria. Moving on to the decision tree for escalation. Again, this was a lengthy debate within CHMP and also with member states, but we did agree on certain rules for escalating a shortage onto the European level. And basically a product that is not classified as critical would not be immediately escalated to the European level. And also products that experience maybe just a temporary problem and their use could be postponed, such as vaccination. In that case, there is no need to deal on that with that product on European level. So again, this is very clearly set out in our paper. Public catalogue of supply shortages. I think this is a major milestone, and there are colleagues from the EMA here behind me from the communication department. We all recognize that the way that the information was put on our website on different shortages was not optimal. There were separate press releases, there were updates of press releases, there were the individual DHPC letters from companies, etc. So there was not really a place where a concise information on each product supply shortage could be found. So what we propose to do is to have a separate and dedicated section on our website on the shortages, whether they are ongoing or they have been resolved. And we have constructed a table or a template for each product that has such a problem, with a short introduction to the product. So indication where it's being used, how it's being used, what are the affected strengths or formulations, which member states are experiencing any kind of problem, when did the shortage start, and what are the recommendations, if the recommendations already have been made to switch or to lower or etc. And then we will be updating this information regularly as new information will come up. I would like to say that this catalog will apply to all the medicines that have been dealt with on the European level. So the critical medicines, and for all those that have been escalated to the CHMP. It will obviously be all the centrally authorized products and also the nationally authorized products that went through a referral where the CHMP made a decision. In terms of the benefit risk assessment, importance of which I stressed out earlier, we have prepared two separate documents. The first document points to consider for assessment of shortages will facilitate the actual assessment, because we feel this is a truly multidisciplinary task for any authority, European Medicines Agency, CHMP, or on a national level, and it brings in the knowledge from different sources, the quality, the non-clinical, the clinical, the appropriateness of pharmacovigilance measures, etc. So we have put down quite a solid template for considering all this type of information for the assessors. The second document, resources for issuing recommendations, is an important one because very often we are only faced with limited information from the MAH, from the company, but we also need the information from the company who is manufacturing or distributing the alternative treatment or potential alternative treatment on the stock supply, on their inventory, on their situation, what is the situation on the US market, on the European market. So we would like to put all this information together. Sometimes we also look back at the original marketing authorization. I think this was the case for Fabrazyme that was mentioned by Carla Holak this morning. We were issuing some recommendations, and we could actually see a clinical study that the MAH did with a much lower dose. They were conducting a dose-finding study. So although the optimal dose for Fabrazyme is stated in the SMPC, we could also see potential benefit with a lower dose. So the CHMP used this information, tied it all together, and created certain recommendations. So we're using this type of document also just to facilitate the assessment process. The proactive risk management by MAHs or the companies, we've created a concept paper on risk indicators, trying to look at the most vulnerable parts of a manufacturing chain or distribution chain and try to identify the supply shortage problem or the problems that could lead to a supply shortage, and also a concept paper on the proactive risk management for manufacturers, but this has not been finalized yet. The other issue I also mentioned before was the impact of a supply shortage on the patients. This is also currently being developed. We would like to see what is really the outcome after the supply is restored, and what was the actual how the patient was clinically affected during the time of the shortage. Again, I'm referring to Fabrazyme because I'm familiar with the product. We were able, after about 2 years of the ongoing shortage, where we had various recommendations, and the situation was not at all straightforward. There were patients on a lower dose, there were patients that were switched to an alternative, etc. But the CHMP prepared one overall assessment report that is on our website. And in fact, we achieved also amendment of the product information for the physicians and for the patients, because we feel that type of information, what to do, what happens with the patient in a situation of a supply problem, is also very beneficial clinically for both physicians and patients. In terms of further steps, this is just a summary of all the issues we think we still need to do. We are already preparing an internal SOP, how to handle the reports of shortages. Brendan is very much involved in trying to find the best way how to handle rapid alerts, how to distribute the information to the individual member states once the shortage is reported to us. We're working with other international agencies. I mentioned that earlier. We are all sitting here today to do something about shortages, so we are all involved in this workshop. We would like to promote again the proactive risk management with industry, and I just talked about the impact of a shortage on a patient and in terms of a follow-up. So at this moment, I thank you for your attention, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer later on. Thank you.